Hello there, Homeschool Nolan here to help you navigate learning in the digital age. Another school year has gone by, and it's graduation time for the class of 2021. And today, I'd like to share with you some of the things I've learned in my first year as a homeschooling parent. But first, before last year, I never thought that I would ever become a homeschooling parent. After all, my wife and I moved into our neighborhood in large part because of the good public schools here. And as a full-time working parent, I didn't think that we would have the bandwidth or the time to properly homeschool our kids. But then, of course, the pandemic came, and then the lockdowns. It forced every parent, whether they were ready to or not, to become homeschoolers. And when school reopened later in the last fall, they were only open for remote learning. But after nearly half a year of homeschooling, we decided to continue homeschooling our 7-year-old son. And today, I'd like to share with you a few important lessons we learned from our first year of homeschooling. First, learning is more important than schooling. What do I mean by that? Well, before last year, I had always perceived homeschooling as trying to recreate school in your own home. After all, that's why they call it homeschooling, right? So I started by buying whiteboards and hanging them next to our kitchen table and desks. I also created a spreadsheet where I could keep student records and track the hours spent on each subject. But then I realized that the traditional classroom setup and record keeping is really more ideal for traditional schools that have to teach 30 or more students per classroom, and not as ideal for a self-learning home environment. As a homeschooler, I had to break out the mentality that a teacher standing in front of a classroom dispensing knowledge to empty minds was the only model for teaching. I also learned that I didn't need to get bogged down in the record keeping that schools are required to do in order to track dozens if not hundreds of students. Instead, I should just focus on helping my kids learn. They can still learn by listening to me and my wife teach in front of a whiteboard, but they could also learn by watching a video or by the old-fashioned way of reading a book. They can also learn by working with a personal tutor or going to a learning center in math or music or art. With so many tools for learning, homeschooling gives you more opportunities to find the right approach for your child's particular style of learning. As a homeschooling parent, I became much more of a coach than a teacher. My main job is to motivate and encourage my children to become self-motivated themselves and develop a hunger for learning. I use different techniques to teach my kids, and I was also surprised to learn that remote learning can sometimes actually be better than in-person learning for homeschoolers. You see, when I first started teaching history to a small group of kids, I did so in person at our kitchen table using a whiteboard. I would teach history showing pictures and images, maps, and videos on our TV. But then one day, when one of the kids in our pod couldn't make it in person, we decided to do our class over Zoom. I then realized it was actually much easier to share pictures and videos over a computer screen than in person. It dawned on me that remote learning can actually work better than in-person learning for homeschoolers if your group is small and you want to provide a rich multimedia experience using pictures and video clips. I know a lot of parents complained this past year about remote learning, but I think remote learning is more problematic if you're trying to recreate a traditional classroom setting of, say, 20 or 30 students and requiring them to sit in front of a screen for 4 to 6 hours per day. That's why so many parents complained about it when it was used as pretty much the only means of teaching during the lockdowns. But the key is knowing which tools are best for what. And remote learning can be a valuable tool for providing a rich multimedia learning experience for a smaller group of students. Another important lesson I learned is don't worry about socialization. Like many other parents, I used to be reluctant about homeschooling because I feared about socialization and how my kids would miss out on meeting people and making friends at school. But the irony is that because of the pandemic and the lockdowns, many homeschoolers actually got more socialization this past year. My kids still regularly met, learned, and played with other kids in our homeschooling pod and in our neighborhood during this past year. And as we emerge from the pandemic, they will have more opportunities to meet more kids at church, learning centers, and going to art and sports classes. Now, granted, this socialization is a bit different. My homeschooler will not be in a classroom with 30 or more kids, and he probably won't be on a campus with hundreds of other kids. But the socialization he is experiencing now as a homeschooler, I believe, is closer to the type of socialization he will experience later in life as an adult, where you interact with people of all ages, and whether or not you meet people really depends on you and how proactive you are in going out. Remember, socialization happens in life, not just in schools. I hope this has been helpful to you as you decide whether to homeschool or whether you continue to homeschool as we emerge from the pandemic. I believe that just as working from home has become the new normal, so has learning from home. And this goes for both kids and parents alike. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.